Hi, I'm Ashley Garton, here to share with you my action research project titled The Impact of Blended Learning Mathematics Instruction on Test Scores, Attitudes, and Anxiety Levels of 5th grade students with learning disabilities. Moving forward, a first look at my abstracts broken down. Again, the purpose was determining the effect of blended learning, and to do that we're looking at test scores, attitudes, and anxiety levels. The participants are 5th grade Tier 3 students who were randomly selected out of a class of 27. 14 were chosen to be in the treatment group, 13 remained in the control group. Quantitative data was gathered in the form of a pre- and post-unit exam. This was Unit 3 of Everyday Math, fractions, and then qualitative data was gathered using an attitude inventory with both attitude and anxiety-related statements, as well as 3 open response questions. The research-based support for change comes from 7 studies. The first took place at Jacksonville State University, and it took a look at undergrad students. Basically, at the end of it, it concluded that the students reported significantly higher learning motivation and higher levels of learning outcomes. They also had a greater desire to participate in blended learning groups in their education as they move forward, and would highly recommend the same format to their peers. The second study at Texas A&M was carried out among undergrad history students. They utilized a half-flipped or blended methodology, and the results showed that because of the technology-embedded lecture that occurred outside of the classroom became incredibly student-centered with peer-to-peer and student-to-instructor interaction. And the result was that the greater majority of students became more comfortable with their understanding of material, and they had an overwhelming desire to take more classes using the blended learning model. A further study was done in an elementary school in western Massachusetts. It focused on grade 1 and 2 students in a reading class. In this particular study, the students in the treatment group who received the blended learning techniques had results that were much higher in the area of reading comprehension as compared to the control group who continued to be taught in a traditional manner. The next study was on grades 9 through 12 Algebra 2 students. This is where the same teacher delivered their identical instruction to 2 different groups, one using the live lecture method, and then the treatment group received the embedded learning, blended learning over a 4-week period. A math test and a student survey were used to measure the students' learning of the Algebra 2 concepts, as well as a survey to measure the satisfaction with instruction. The results showed that the students in the treatment group showed significantly greater gains in the Algebra 2, and they evaluated their learning experiences significantly more positively than the control group. In fact, 80% of the students in the treatment group preferred the embedded blended learning over traditional live lectures and wished for this in their future learning of math. The next study took place at the University of Granada and focused on 1,128 undergrad students. And again, there was a positive correlation in the students' final marks based on receiving the blended learning instruction. It has been consistently evident throughout the research that the studies, regardless of age level or education level, they benefited from the blended learning format and preferred this method whenever they were given an option. The next study, which was conducted over 31 middle schools, showed that 335 middle schoolers who were receiving instruction at these, 15 of which continued or were able to use the blended learning model, and 16 of which continued the business as usual or traditional methods. Those in the 15 blended schools showed higher than the 16 schools that operated as usual in test results on their standardized testing and the research design test. Now the last study is put in here sort of as a cautionary tale. This was done on a group of university professors, and it surveyed their belief system and their value placed on blended learning, and also looked at the effort that they made in creating an integrated online experience with their one-on-one teaching time. The reason I say this is cautionary is because the results showed that the success of the blended learning and the level of satisfaction for the students was dependent upon the amount of time and energy that was put into integrating the online component with the one-to-one class time component. Moving forward with my study and looking at my data plan, I used an attitude inventory to collect my qualitative data. You will see a list of 20 statements there that students rated on a scale of 1 to 5. This is a skill they have used previously and are comfortable with. And then next to that, there were also 3 open response questions. In regards to the 20 statements on the inventory, they were hand-selected statements out of a much larger inventory that were based on statements and feelings that have previously been expressed by my students. And they take a look at both attitude and anxiety levels. For instance, number 1, math is very worthwhile and a necessary subject, is in regards to attitude, while question 6 looks at anxiety, my mind goes blank and I'm unable to think clearly when working with math. This shows an analysis of the qualitative data. You can see in that final column the rate of change. The positive numbers indicate those related to attitude, and the negatives are decreases in anxiety. And you can see the gap there in both the last columns. For the treatment group first and then the control group, much greater spreads for the treatment group. For instance, again, that math is a very necessary subject, an attitude statement had a growth of 35 hundredths. The number 2, I want to develop my mathematical skills, again, an attitude had a growth of an entire point. If we look at an anxiety base, number 9, I'm always under a terrible strain in math class. That decreased by 1 and 22 hundredths. On the control group side, you can see that the rate of change there is much smaller, in fact, all under less than 1. This takes a look in a different means. You're able to see the pre and post of the control group in the 2 shades of green there, and the pre and post of the treatment group in the yellow and the orange. And this just gives you a view on that point system. To the left, the scale values, you can see that the growth between the greens for the control are very small, while there are some very significant jumps for the treatment group. For instance, statement 15, statement 17, 18, 20, you see very large steps. Taking a look at the quantitative data, this is the Unit 3 pre and post test that was given. This is the first 2 pages of 4. 20%, I think it's important to note, 20% of this test did look at previously learned skills, while 80% of the test was new information that we covered during this 2-week study. And here is a look at that quantitative data. 2 bar graphs here, the first showing the treatment group, the second showing the control group. You can see that across the board, the pre-test, which is the lighter green, down in the 10-20% ranges for both treatment and control. Then when we look at our post-test results, we can see that with the exception of 1 student, everyone in the treatment group scored at 70% or higher. Over in our control group, there were a few more that fell below that 70% mark. As well, overall, as far as height goes, within the control group, the highest was just over 80%, while in the treatment group, we had multiples that were over 80% and even had into the 90%. And again, a reminder that these are our Tier 3 math kids that we're looking at. I also think it's important here to note that the control group, while not subjected to the blended learning format, the data is skewed, in my opinion, and it's important to note the fact that the control group was now experiencing their learning with paras in a much smaller setting than prior to the study. So the growth that I saw for them was also encouraging in that aspect. The list here includes references and where you were able to find further information. I do find that the study was very positive, and I am continuing in this methodology within my classroom. We are making some adjustments due to increasing the number to cover the full 27 students as opposed to the 14 that were in the group. Thank you for taking time to listen. Goodbye.